I'd like to start with a summary and then give my report. The summary is the Federal Reserve policy is crashing the American economy, and millions of Americans could lose their homes through no fault of their own. It's a result of Fed policy. And while the Fed is doing that to Main Street America, they are still bailing out the big banks. By some measures, even more than in 2008. So if you make a mistake, middle class America, you lose your home. If the big banks make a mistake, not only do they get to keep their stuff, but the Federal Reserve, their policy right now, will provide those banks the capital they need to buy the home that Federal Reserve policy cost you. You lose your home, the banks will buy it up with money provided by the Federal Reserve. That's my summary. Here's my report. The inevitable effect of current Federal Reserve and U.S. government Treasury policy is going to be to suck away all the wealth of the middle class, the upper middle class, and the barely rich, and transfer it into the hands of the extremely rich. And it does not matter whether there is a secret vast conspiracy to do this or whether it's simply the inevitable result of what happens when they know they need to be tough on the economy to preserve the dollar, but at the same time they want to make allowances for their friends and people of their class and station and political affiliation. Doesn't matter which of those two things is true. What matters is the result. The result is going to be they're going to own everything and you're going to own nothing, and it isn't going to be a result of their great merit, but because they've rigged the system to where they can't lose. Look at what they're doing. They bailed out the big banks in 2008, and it outraged everybody. So when COVID came along and they had to shut everything down to keep the economy going, they didn't want to bail out the big banks again without also bailing out the regular people. And so they did that. They tried to bail out everybody to keep political dissatisfaction down, because if they locked you in your homes and shut down the economy and kept you from making a living while continuing to fund the banks, people would revolt, or they should. So they paid off everybody. And that resulted in a big smashing blow of inflation. And their power rests on them having this magic money machine that they can print out dollars that people accept have value. So when the dollar started obviously inflating away, instead of doing it slowly over the generations like they've been doing it, it was happening all at once and people were noticing. So they realized they couldn't do that again. So here we are, they're raising interest rates to try to protect the dollar, to tame inflation, and it's crushing the Main Street economy. People are hurting. People are in danger of losing their homes. Businesses are crashing. And so are banks. And so what they've decided to do is, if the right bank, if the big banks, if the banks full of the deposits of the super wealthy and the connected go under, we will rescue them. So at the same time they're crushing the Main Street economy, they're bailing out the privileged banks, not your community bank. There was an Oklahoma senator that questioned Janet Yellen recently, and it was very interesting. He said, look, you're bailing out Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank. These are banks that mostly have big depositors that were investing in tech businesses, and they were high net worth individuals. And so you've decided you're not going to just rescue them for $250,000. You're going to rescue them for however much they have in the bank. All the depositors will be rescued. What are you going to do to keep my community bank rescued? And if you don't do anything, why should the big depositors stay there? What your policy is doing is making sure that all the big depositors flee the little banks and go to these big banks where their deposits are guaranteed with no limit, no matter what the FDIC limit is. That they'll be insured if you're in a politically connected bank, but they won't be if you're in a regular bank. Obviously, the big money is going to leave the little banks. And she really had no answer. She basically said, if we vote that the bank is systemically important to bail out, we'll bail everybody out. So again, if you're connected and they can vote an exception to the rule, your money is safe if you're in that kind of bank. If you're in a bank that's disfavored, it just goes under. Like Main Street America is going under because of their policies. They won't stop government spending. They won't stop weaponizing the dollar, and those things are inflationary, but they won't change them. All they want to do is raise interest rates on you, Main Street America. They want you to suffer all the pain of tame inflation while they don't change their behavior one bit. I made another video about this, but it's now gotten worse. It's gotten worse since I made that video about 2 weeks ago, because now Main Street America is crashing. They still want to hike, but it's causing some of their favored banks to go under. And so they're not only are they rescuing Silicon Valley and those giant left-wing and maybe even Communist Party connected. A lot of Chinese money seemed to have found its way into that bank. The big guys, they're also letting the big banks go to the Fed discount window, which they've always been able to do, but they didn't have to do it until recently. Until recently, the use of the Fed discount window was low. But when this happened, it jumped up higher than it was during the crisis, during the last COVID crisis and during the 2008 financial crisis. What is the Fed discount window, you ask? It is yet another way to steal that the big banks have put together for themselves and that the government supports. You have a bunch of securities. The value of securities goes down. You need money. To say there's a run on your bank and you don't have enough reserves. The idea is you can take your securities to this government entity and they will either loan you money on them or buy them off of you at above market rates. You can get access to money quickly. You can take your securities. Hey, we lost these gambles on these securities. We want you to loan us money on them as if we won the bet, as if they were still what we say they are on our books. So why quit gambling? If you've got the government at your back, if your government takes all your losing bets and gives you money for them as if they were winning bets, why stop gambling? And they haven't stopped gambling. That's why this time when there was a stretch to the system, the use of the Fed discount window was even higher than it was in 2008. They have fixed nothing. Everything has gotten worse because there's no incentive for the banks to stop it. Why should they stop over leveraging? The government is bailing them out. Why should they show fiduciary duty? The government even has their depositors covered if you're the right people. So what is the inevitable result of this policy? What has to happen? If they engineer through high interest rates an economic crash for Main Street economy while at the same time bailing out the big banks, what is eventually going to happen? They're going to own everything and the rest of us will own nothing. That's the only end possible. The only end possible. And very few elected officials are talking about this. And if they don't start, we need another party that will. Because it is, people think, oh, these other rights are so important. Gun rights are important. Gun rights are no good if you can't buy the gun and you can't buy the ammunition. Free speech doesn't matter if all you can do is stand on your street corner and scream. We have to have access to our resources. We have to have some accumulated wealth so that all together, maybe no one of us middle class people, upper middle class people, barely rich people, maybe no one of us is that big, but if they move against all of us together, we can resist them, and there's some cost to that. Once they separate us from our wealth, we'll just be more beggars. And that's what's happening. And it doesn't matter whether it's by design or whether just in the course of trying to protect the fiat dollar, because the fiat dollar is their way of buying love and buying power and influence. They have to be tough on everybody, but then they make exceptions for their friends. So, it could be just as simple as that kind of cronyism. It doesn't matter. The end result is the same. It's a crime against the American people. And again, we should stop it. If the Democrats won't stop it, they're behind it. If the Republicans won't stop it, they're ignoring it. We should start a party that does. It's that important. Thank you so much for listening, folks.